Frostbite, the first installment in Frostbite and Feathercloak by ThistleOnions. The rating is teen and up audiences, and no archive warnings apply. The category is Gen, and the fandom is Hermitcraft SMP and Third Life, Last Life SMP series. The relationships are Solidarity/Tango Tech, Skizzleman and Tango Tech, Impulse SV and Tango Tech, and ZF Plays in Tango Tech. Characters are Tango Tech, Pearlescent Moon, Impulse SV, Solidarity, ZF Plays, Skizzleman, Grian, and original characters. Additional tags are Alternate Universe, Superhero/Superpowers, Vigilante Tango Tech, Tango has Ice Powers, Avian Solidarity, Sheep Hybrid ZF Plays, Avian Skizzleman, Avian Pearlescent Moon, Avian Grian, Non-Binary ZF, Pre-Relationship, Jimmy and Tango will be together later in the series, Fluff and Angst, Humor, Action, Science Fiction, Hybrids, Intrigue, Secret Identity, Midlife Crisis, Grian is Cute Guy, Embedded Images, Not RPF, Blanket Permission, Podfic Welcome, other additional tags to be added, and Tango-centric. Summary. Tango's life has not gone how he thought it would. Stuck in a dead-end job and feeling like his whole life is slipping through his fingers. He just wants something, anything, to change. Suddenly, he gets his wish, and Tango finds himself thrown into the world of superheroes and masked villains. Chapter 1. The sun had already set behind the city skyline. Of course the sun had set already. It was November now. He'd had to work later than usual. Late enough that he didn't get to say goodbye to Impulse and Zed before they left. Late enough that the cleaning staff was forced to work around him. And now he was walking home in the dark with only the street lamps and passing cars to light his way. Tango grumbled under his breath and tugged at his turtleneck, glaring up at the sky as though it would feel ashamed of itself and bring the sun back up. He couldn't even see the stars. He huffed again. November through January were the worst. He left his apartment before sunrise, worked at his shitty desk job all day, and left long after sunset. He thought he wouldn't mind the whole never seeing the sun thing if his job wasn't so useless and mind-numbing. This wasn't how his life was supposed to go. Tango should have been a redstoner. He should have been an inventor. He should have been an aerospace engineer, designing ships and tools to aid in the exploration of space and the end and the nether. But no, of course he wasn't anything like that. He graduated near the top of his class in Masters in Redstone Engineering, right alongside Impulse. 7 years of college behind them, and the future looked bright. They'd get jobs at the same company, redstone under their nails, and money in their pockets, building and designing and creating. They would help usher in a new high-tech world, and they would love every minute of it. Only no one had been hiring. He'd held out for months, watching as his savings quickly dwindled. And then he'd been forced to take another job, just for a bit, just until he could join his real career. And then months turned to years, turned to almost 2 decades now of working as a damned quality insurance engineer at a company that couldn't care less about his ambitions or his well-being. And shit, if Tango even had any ambitions anymore. He sighed, wishing for something, anything, to put an end to this awful listlessness. But what was he even supposed to do? What did he want to do? Tango left the light of his streetlight, stepping into darkness again. Thankfully, he was almost home. Home was where he would find his comfy couch and his distracting TV and a plate of cold pizza. His best buddy, Skiz, would greet him when he entered and share some tall tale about a disastrous date or some hijinks he'd gotten up to at the gym. Tango was between one street lamp and another when he heard a noise. Now, noises weren't exactly unusual in Alison. Traffic and crowds and animals and machines were rarely quiet. But this noise was notable. It sounded like a scuffle, and like a muffled scream, and like a muttered curse. He stopped in place, his gaze drawn into the shadows of the alley to his right. The space wasn't terribly wide, maybe 6 feet across, squished between a bakery and a pawn shop. There was a smell emanating from it, garbage and rot. The alley stretched back a good distance, and at the end of it he could just make out what seemed to be a group of people, moving erratically. Someone was struggling, and his blood froze in his veins when he realized what exactly he was looking at. Someone was being attacked! Tango ducked away from the mouth of the alleyway, each breath caught in his throat, struggling to claw its way out of his chest. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and swiped through to emergency services. His thumb hovered over the call button. Why wouldn't his hand stop shaking? And then he heard what seemed to be a young woman's voice gasp and cry out, "Help!" Her voice was cut off by the sound of a strike. "Shut up!" someone muttered. "What are you doing?" he asked himself. "Hit the button. Call the cops. Help her. God damn it." But how long would it take for help to arrive? What if he called, and by the time anyone got here, the worst had already happened? What if he did something? His phone screen went dark. The reflection he saw staring back at him was exhausted. Old, wide eyes with dark bags. A permanent crease between his eyebrows. Sharp teeth digging into his lower lip. He could do something. He shoved his phone back into the pocket of his jacket and tugged his turtleneck up again, pulling it over his nose. His heart was pounding. What am I doing? He ignored the thought, ripping his messenger bag off his shoulder and dropping it in front of the pawn shop. "Hey, you jerks!" he shouted. He placed himself directly in the mouth of the alleyway. The shadowy figure stilled, just briefly, and someone turned toward him. Tango could almost make out a face. He took a deep breath, and he launched an ice spear right at that stupid face. Tango had just started working toward his master's degree when his powers manifested. He panicked the first time he'd woken up cocooned in ice, sure he'd been dragged into the plot of a horror movie in his sleep. His scream had woken Impulse in the other room, who'd come rushing in to help. The ice didn't feel cold, not the way he'd experienced cold his whole life up to this point. The cold was comfortable, somehow, and it felt right, which is why he panicked more. Impulse was the one who realized it first. "Calm down, Tango. You made it. You can get rid of it." The ice melted easily once Tango managed to get his breathing under control, soaking into his mattress and dripping down onto the floor. Tango did not want his powers. Superpowers weren't exactly unheard of these days, and though they weren't well understood yet, they were accepted as a part of life. However, if you manifested superpowers, your next step was to register at your local EHDA recruitment office. Join the Enhanced Human Defense Agency today. Recruitment is always open. Make a difference in your community. The posters were tacked up all over the place. The words paired with photographs of the big-name superheroes, like Gnasher and Hawkeye, and Scarlet Macaw. Superheroes were all over TV, on the news and talk shows and guest starring on sitcoms. They had fan pages and social media accounts, and they all sung the praises of the EHDA. Remember, only superheroes have superpowers. If you had superpowers, you had two options. Option 1, join the EHDA. Become a superhero. Fight for your country. Follow your orders. Option 2, hide them. "I can't," Tango mumbled aloud, his head cradled in his hands as he choked down bile and spit. I can't, Impulse. I can't join the EHDA. I have a meeting with my advisor tomorrow, and I have a test on Thursday. And, Impulse, I can't be a superhero. I can't. Being a superhero meant performing and fighting. It meant jumping around in spandex and smiling for the cameras. It meant hurting and being hurt. And all Tango wanted was to work with redstone, to mold it with his hands, to make things. "Then don't," said Impulse, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "We won't tell them. No one ever has to know." And those were the words Tango had lived by for nearly 20 years since. The ice spear missed its mark, shattering against the person's jacket as they jerked their arm up to cover their face. "The fuck are you?" someone snarled, and the group separated into several distinct figures. 7 people, maybe, though it was hard to tell in such dim lighting. They were all wearing dark clothing, long sleeves and long pants, and sturdy boots. 3 of the figures were pressed up against the bakery wall, 2 of them pinning the third. She was an avian, The light gray of her wings, pressed tightly between her back and the dirty bricks behind her, were the only bright spot in the darkness. She thrashed against her captors. Tango gritted his teeth and shot a blast of icy shards at the jerks. "Let her go," he demanded. Another ice weapon was already forming in his hand, and he tilted himself forward, one foot planted in front of the other. Someone let out a sharp scream, but he couldn't tell who or why. He was already moving forward, the ground freezing beneath his feet and allowing him to slide across it, faster than any of them could move. And he slammed the full force of his weight into the unfortunate soul closest to him. He knocked them to the ground, all the air forced out of their lungs in a single oof. And as Tango caught himself to keep from meeting the same fate, someone grabbed onto his arm, yanking him toward them and twisting. Tango hissed in pain, but he didn't stop. He kicked out, ice and frozen bits of gravel flinging up in the air to strike his assailant. They grunted, their grip slackening, and Tango used that opening to knock into them, sending them slamming back against the wall with a thud. The avian woman had managed to free one of her wings, the huge limb flapping angrily as she struggled against her would-be kidnappers. "Get him too! Quick, restrain him!" Tango dodged a strike aimed at his stomach, his feet slipping out from under him. Stupid loafers, should have worn winter boots. He grabbed the ankles of one of the goons on his way down, wrenching. And as soon as they hit the ground, he froze them in place, ice holding their clothing to the cement in an iron grip. Someone else grabbed him, trying to pin him the way they had the avian woman. And through the chaos of it all, he was aware of the chill of ice at his fingertips, the comfort of the cold. There was a smell, too, something sharp and clean, cutting through the stench of the alleyway. But before he could put his finger on it, a ball of ice formed in his hand, heavy and solid, and he slammed it into the side of his attacker's head. They grunted, falling slack, and Tango scrambled to his feet. Someone else was following suit, and the light caught on sharp fangs, deadly claws. They glinted dangerously. The Pax launched herself at him, mouth open wide to drive those dagger-like fangs in his flesh. With a quick swipe of his foot, Tango slipped out of the way, trailing ice after him as he moved behind her. She stumbled forward, palms out to catch herself. Tango drew the ice up to meet her, freezing her hands and feet to the ground. "Kip, it's too much! Leave her! Get back up!" the Pax woman called in a strangled voice. But the boss said, "Go!" One of the goons pressed against the avian woman peeled away, dashing for the wall at the end of the alley. Tango wouldn't let them get away. Who knew what would happen if they managed to call for backup before Tango could get the avian away? He shot forward after them, hands outstretched and ice shards already forming between them. He grabbed at their clothes, willing the ice to expand, and it crawled up the guy's torso. The two of them slammed into the wall, and when Tango released them, the ice held them steady against the bricks. He whirled around, ready to fight again, but no one jumped at him. 6 figures lay scattered around the alley. Some were frozen to the ground, others slumped against the walls. The avian woman stood alone. Her wings, Tango could see now that they were pigeon wings, gray and black and iridescent in the moonlight, spread behind her defensively. She was breathing hard, eyeing him. "You all right?" he ventured. And she stilled for a moment, staring at him with frightened blue eyes. Then she straightened, shoulders slumping even as her wings remained outstretched. She was tall, he noticed. "Yeah," she said. "Thanks for the help." Then, "You've, got a little..." She gestured at her own face. And Tango, confused, mirrored her gesture. Oh, his turtleneck had slipped down at some point during the fight, and he scrambled to tug it back up. The woman cracked a smile at that. "Don't worry. I won't tell anyone." "Oh, good. Thanks." Now that the fight was over, Tango could feel his heart pumping, the spiking in his blood. His hands shook at his sides, and he clenched them into fists. "I'm pro, by the way." She let her wings fold in, not quite relaxed, but not nearly as defensive now. She looked around at her would-be kidnappers. We should probably go, don't you think?" She let out a shaky breath and stepped closer to the alley's entrance. He shook himself, forcing himself to focus. Right. Do you know why they were after you? And can you call the cops?" "No clue. Pearl reached in her jacket pocket and pulled out her phone. Yeah, I can do that. You should probably get out of here before I do, since I doubt you're registered with the EHDA. She gave him a little half grin, and he knew she wasn't judging him. Tango let out a shaky exhale and gave her a quick nod. Right, yeah, I should go. He stepped around the knocked-out goons toward the alley entrance. Okay, bye. He dashed out of the alleyway and snatched up his bag, running toward home. Holy shit! Is this how it felt to be a superhero?